The skies above Vardun were never meant to burn. For centuries, the Dathari Imperium had held dominion over the planet's orbit, its fortress stations casting a permanent twilight over the surface below. Great storms of ionized metal rained across the upper atmosphere, products of industrialized war routines long since perfected. They had turned Vardun into a foundry world, its native life scorched, its soil mined hollow, its purpose narrowed to feeding the fleets and armies of the Imperium's eternal campaign. So when fire began to fall from above, real fire, not manufactured plasma or metal slag, every sensor on the planet registered anomaly. No one could recall a time when the heavens themselves wept flame. And no one expected it to be caused by humans. In the war crypt of Bastion 17, high on the basalt cliffs of the northern continent, General Karash watched the descent from his command chamber. His three ocular ridges twitched in quiet disdain, his tendrils curling beneath his ceremonial armor. A dozen other Dathari generals occupied the vaulted chamber with him, each positioned at a height signifying their campaign status. Karash stood near the top, but not at the summit. That place was held by Archlord General Vuroth, commander of the sector. "The humans again," Karash hissed, gesturing at the descending fire trails with one spined hand. "Their defiance is persistent, like mold under warm metal." Vuroth's maw opened slowly. "Persistence is not power, they fight as insects do, disorganized, desperate. Do not mistake chaos for strategy." "They have taken 3 minor installations in the span of a solar cycle," said another general, a female called Irashtal. "That is not negligible." "They lost 8,000 soldiers to claim outposts not worth half that in fuel," Vuroth growled. "They bleed freely and believe it bravery, that is their flaw." Karash nodded. "They believe death is a form of progress, it is primitive, inefficient." They all turned as a hololith activated, projecting a grainy feed of the incoming human strike force. Unlike the Dathari's engineered soldiers, tall, scaled, bred for specific tasks, humans came in all varieties, tall, short, lean, massive. The footage showed them in cobbled-together armor, some with helmets still bearing the insignia of fallen Earth nations, others etched with new marks: the Phoenix of Luna, the Broken Crown, the Sigma Blade. Their vessels were jagged, clearly retrofitted civilian ships, armored in salvaged alien plating. Their weapons crackled with unstable power sources. They looked like chaos given form. "They mean to siege Bastion 17, Vuroth said. "Let them try." Among the incoming ships was the Lance of Alexandria, a carrier replica refitted by Earth's orbital Forge 10. On board, Colonel Samaran Durrell checked the stabilization sequences while ignoring the pain in his right arm. He hadn't let the medics replace it with a synth limb, not yet. He wanted to feel every ache, every fracture. 30 seconds to breach," his lieutenant, Maya Kaur, called from the flank seat. Her eyes gleamed under the low red light, the left one augmented with a Dathari lens stolen from a field lab in the Sarin Belt. "You ready?" Durrell asked her. "I was ready when they called us unfit to be soldiers," she said. Durrell allowed himself a half-smile. "Then let's show them what unfit looks like." Outside, the ship broke through the upper defense layer under a hail of magnetized flak. 6 other human ships followed, each a miracle of jury-rigged science and sheer will. Durrell's team, the Ghost Pike Battalion, were the tip of the spear. 95 soldiers from 29 Earth territories, none of them born soldiers, farmers, hackers, miners, convicts, defectors. But all of them killers now. When the landing craft smashed into the exterior wall of Bastion 17, the siege began. Durrell led the breach through a collapsed hangar platform. The Bastion's internal defense grids came online in sections, flickering with incompletely adapted algorithms, stolen human code spliced with Dathari logic cores. It made the turrets erratic. Durrell used that. He and his team moved like fire through a grain field, using cover not meant for them, opening routes never considered viable. They didn't follow doctrine, they made it. Dathari defenders responded with phalanx units, 6 limbed brutes armored in fused living metal. In clean, ordered warfare, they were invincible. But this wasn't clean warfare. Durrell's people flooded the corridors with radiation-fried targeting systems with backdoor viral pulses and physically tackled opponents that outweighed them threefold. One by one, the phalanxes went down. At the command level, Karash watched the feeds in disbelief. "This is not possible. They are inside within the first hour." "They lack the discipline for sustained control," Vuroth said. "This is an incursion, not a threat." "Then I will meet it myself," Karash said, rising, his armor unfurling from the base of the dais. "I will end this before it becomes an embarrassment." Down in the ruined data sanctum, Durrell fought through a tunnel collapse, coughing blood, his helmet cracked. Meyer had vanished in the breach. 10 of his people lay dead. He didn't pause. He found the next route, a maintenance shaft lined with coolant leaks, and climbed through without hesitation. He emerged into a control nexus where 3 Dathari officers were coordinating drone deployments. They turned to him as if he were a hallucination. Dural crushed the first one's trachea with a metal bar, shot the second through the skull with a Dathari plasma tool, stabbed the third until the screams stopped. Only then did he breathe again. On the upper citadel level, Karash arrived to confront what he believed would be the remnants of a broken squad. Instead, he found Dural waiting, alone, standing in a circle of burned-out tech and melted armor, his face half-shadowed by the glow of a ruptured power conduit. "You are the one leading this," Karash said, stepping forward. "You are unaugmented, scarred, your weapon is inferior, you will die in seconds." Dural didn't move. "Maybe, but you'll die first." Karash roared and charged. It should have been over quickly. But it wasn't. Dural ducked the first strike, rolled under the sweeping blade arm, and drove his shoulder into Karash's midsection. The impact stunned the general. Then Dural struck again, elbow, knee, throat punch, eye gouge, not for honor, not for technique, for damage, for fury. Karash lashed out with a spinal hook. It tore across Dural's back, blood sprayed. Dural tackled him through a wall. The two of them crashed into a subdeck power array, sparks cascading around them. Dural seized a broken power conduit and jammed it into Karash's side, sending a scream echoing across the comms grid. His armor flared, resisting, but the human's grip didn't falter. "You said we were unfit," Dural growled through clenched teeth. "You think strength is what makes a soldier." He tore the conduit out and used it to shatter Karash's jaw. "What makes a soldier," Dural said, raising his blood-slick hands, "is refusing to lose, even when we're broken." And then, with nothing but rage and bone and the last breath in his lungs, he crushed Karash's throat with his bare hands. When it was done, the bastion fell into silence. Across the Dathari command network, the defeat of General Karash spread like a virus. A human had killed a high general in single combat, without armor enhancements, without engineered bloodlines, without permission. It was not just a breach. It was an insult. Far above, in the orbiting dreadkeep of Vuroth, a new order began to take shape. This was no longer a matter of suppressing rebellion. Humanity had revealed something more dangerous than weapons. They had revealed potential. And in a galaxy ruled by ancient laws and rigid hierarchies, that was the one thing the old powers feared most. The corpse of General Karash was never recovered. The human strike team had detonated the subdeck array before extraction, vaporizing any forensic remnants. The Dathari Imperium officially declared it a technical failure, refusing to log the encounter in the Hall of Warring Memory. Unrecorded meant unacknowledged. But among the high circles of military command, it became a whispered fracture, a moment that refused to stay buried. The bastion had fallen, and though the Dathari reclaimed it within 3 days through orbital bombardment, the damage had already metastasized. It wasn't strategic, it was psychological. Humanity had crossed a threshold. 6 standard cycles later, the humans weren't just raiding outposts. They were building forward bastions of their own, reverse-engineering Dathari defenses, seeding planets with viral terraforming agents that adapted to alien biomes in weeks. Vardun had become a symbol, a story retold in human recruiting halls, etched into war tattoos, referenced in graffiti on shattered moons. They didn't speak of victory, they spoke of the man who crushed a siege with his hands. Samaran Dural survived the battle, but he was never seen again on any official channel. Some claimed he died in the blast and that what the Dathari fought afterward was a myth, a construct. Others whispered that he was leading the next generation of warriors underground, teaching them to fight without fear, without rules, without dependence on machines. Whether dead or alive, Dural had become an idea. And ideas were harder to kill than soldiers. On the world station of Vyarkthal, where the Imperium's Grand Strategic Command convened every 20 cycles, an emergency convocation was called for the first time in 1,000 years. 35 species made up the High Conclave, all under the Imperium's iron hierarchy. The Dathari sat at its apex. Their generals attended the assembly shrouded in ritual robes of black iron thread, their skin glistening with honor royals from conquered worlds. They did not speak for the first hour, a silent condemnation of their own recent failure. When they finally did speak, it was Archlord General Vuroth who addressed the gathering. "The Terrans have spread beyond containment," he said, voice echoing from every panel and relay node. "Their worlds multiply not because of strength, but because of infection. They are reckless, undisciplined, volatile, but there is something in them that resists annihilation." He let the words hang like a blade suspended over a throat. It is not enough to consider them primitives anymore. They must be studied as a strategic anomaly. The hall reacted with uncoordinated murmurs. Strategic anomalies were not treated as enemies. They were treated as potential systemic threats like rogue AI, spatial tiers, or interdimensional phantoms, things that couldn't be reasoned with. Vuroth continued. Already they are creating something new. Their tactical doctrines mutate faster than we can model. Their science rejects linear evolution. They hybridize technology from dozens of species without the deceleration of ethics or regulation. They learn in chaos. From the shadows of the outermost tier, a voice answered. And what is it you propose? It was the voice of Relxira, speaker of the archivic mindclade. Her kind had lived through the fall of the Helix suns and remembered when time itself ruptured across 6 systems. I propose observation, Vuroth said, then dismemberment, one limb at a time. We must break the idea of human victory before it becomes the foundation of something irreversible. Too late, another delegate hissed. Their victory has already become legend. A month later, on the jungle world of Kersh Delta, the Imperium launched a controlled engagement, Operation Spearwake. The objective was not to destroy humans outright, but to provoke, track, and analyze them under battlefield stress. 6 regiments of synthetic-willed Dathari, armed with psychotronic battle cannons and layered in quantum armor, descended on what was believed to be a fringe human science outpost. They found instead a battalion of mobile forges, anti-grav deployables disguised as terrain, and hundreds of human soldiers in adaptive camouflage that responded to both heat and thought. What followed was not a battle, it was a lesson. Human forces lured the Dathari into dense root chasms, triggering magnetic pulse fields that ripped their armor from within. The psychotronic cannons malfunctioned in the geomagnetic haze, rerouted by human-refitted environmental control systems. Then came the sound weapons, untraceable frequencies that overloaded non-human neuroreceptors. Half the Dathari screamed themselves unconscious before the first shot was fired. The humans fought like insurgents with god-tier tech. They broke formation, then reformed in new ones never documented before. Each squad operated semi-independently but shared a swarm intelligence overlay that allowed real-time coordination without traditional command chains. And at the center of it all, visible only briefly through thermals, was a figure some claimed to be Dural himself, taller now, armorless, gaunt, unblinking. After 3 days of running combat, the Dathari forces evacuated with 72% losses. Operation Spearwake was logged as a total failure. The High Conclave had its data, it only made things worse. Back on Earth, or what remained of it, the Unified War Assembly convened beneath the Atlantic Shell, an undersea structure forged from Dathari plating and Terran glass carbon. Delegates from every surviving continent attended, along with emissaries from Luna, Mars, the Titan syndicates, and even free-roaming nomad vessels. Major General Maya Kor addressed them. She wore no insignia, her left arm had been replaced with a plasmaforge interface. Her voice had changed, mechanically reinforced to carry through battlefield static. The galaxy sees us as fractured primitives, she said. They were right, we were. She keyed a holodisplay showing the fall of Bastion 17, then Kersh Delta, then 11 other unreported victories across the rim. But that's over, we've adapted, we've made their weapons ours, we've made ourselves into weapons. Silence followed not from doubt but from anticipation. Maya nodded once. And now we stop reacting. From behind her, a massive chamber opened. Dozens of humanoid constructs emerged, not AI, not drones. Rebuilt humans, volunteers whose bodies had been reforged using the shattered remains of alien physiology, tailored for environments no natural soldier could survive. Each one was imprinted with combat memory protocols, templates based on the tactics and reflexes of Samur and Dural. They called us unfit, Maya said. We will become their standard for fit. In the Edge systems, word spread. The Dathari were no longer hunting humans, they were running from them. Entire patrol ships vanished. Planetary garrisons reported sightings of singular figures breaching compound walls and disappearing. Armored transports found crushed as if by massive fists. Dathari generals began reinforcing inner worlds, rerouting resources from outer colonies. And in the whisper channels of the soldier caste, one name surfaced again and again. Dural, not as a man, as a warning. Back in the bastion where it had all started, rebuilt now by human hands, an inscription had been carved into the stone of the central command pillar. A single sentence in Terran English, flanked by glyphs of 20 defeated species. You thought we were nothing, now we are everything you fear. That inscription wasn't for humans. It was left for the next army that dared invade. And far beyond the galaxy's rim, something else began to stir, not Dathari, not human. Something older. Watching. Waiting. For the first species to break the stagnation. Humanity had announced itself. And the galaxy was listening. There was no record of how the Archons of Ashel first learned of Earth. No treaty had been broken. No incursion had entered their space. But the moment the Terrans took Bastion 17 and held it, their attention shifted, not with words, with action. Within 12 cycles of the Kersh Delta defeat, Deep Realm probes vanished from 7 border sectors. Blackstar trade routes went dark. A listening satellite network operated by the 17th Spiral Accord went offline. The signs were subtle at first, then became impossible to ignore. The Archons had begun to move. The Dathari Imperium, having ruled the Spiral Arm uncontested for millennia, had never dealt with the Archons directly. No one had. The Archons did not conquer, they collected. Their domain was unknown, their motives unclear, their technology utterly opaque. But in ancient cycles they had appeared before, each time to extract something from a civilization, and each time after a great evolutionary leap had occurred. This time they came because of humans. Samaran Dural stood on the edge of Bastion 17's outer ring, unarmored, his body layered in healing gel and regrowth mesh. His right arm had been entirely reconstructed, a blend of human nerve interface and Dathari alloy sinew. The pain was constant, that was the point. He remembered nothing of the detonation that followed his fight with Karash, only flame, darkness, and the wet crunch of alien bone in his hands. When he woke in a medical forge vat, his first instinct had been to stand. His second, to ask if the bastion had held. It had. Now it stood not as a war zone, but as a message. Below him, the plains of Vardun bloomed again, unnaturally fast. Terraforming vectors injected into the crust by human engineers had warped the soil into a dark biome, strong, resilient, self-repairing. The grass shimmered with metallic veins. A new type of photosynthesis, hybridized from Martian red moss and Venusian pressure flora, had taken hold. Nature itself was becoming a weapon. Maya Kor approached him from behind, her footfalls barely audible. She no longer wore command insignia. No one did anymore. Rank was tactical now, not symbolic. "They're coming," she said. Dural didn't turn. Dathari. No, something else. We intercepted a relay burst, not language, patterns, geometric compression pulses. Our linguists are still decoding it, but it's not a threat. What then? A test. Dural's jaw tightened. Good. He stepped back into the corridor, the walls humming with converted Dathari tech, power routing conduits rebuilt for human interface, echonodes now serving as organic computing arrays. The humans didn't just hold Bastion 17. They understood it now. And they were improving it. The transmission came 2 weeks later. It wasn't addressed to any system. It simply appeared in every data stream across every comm frequency in every corner of occupied space. It showed a vision. Not of war, but of annihilation. 100 civilizations, each more advanced than the last, reduced to glass, dust, void. Not by the Archons. By themselves. The voice that followed was a harmonic resonance pulsing through the bones of those who heard it. No translation was required, meaning bled into the mind through tone alone. You were not meant to break the order. Your kind learns too quickly, fights too savagely. Evolves without guidance. This cannot be allowed. And then silence. The Dathari gathered what remained of their senior military caste on Kurilos, their fortress moon above the Gorthal star. The atmosphere was toxic to most, the surface uninhabitable. The Dathari liked it that way, it prevented surprise. Inside the cavern hall known as the Throne of Embers, Vuroth met with his last surviving high generals. Karash was gone, 3 others had vanished after the Kersh Delta humiliation. What remained were traditionalists, but shaken. They'll come for us too, General Irashtal said. The Archons will not stop with humans. No, Vuroth answered, they will start with them, and if they survive, then we all of us cease to matter. You propose we fight beside them. I propose we survive long enough to see what kind of galaxy comes next. On Earth's orbital shell, a summit unlike any before took place. Humanity had no central government now. The Unified War Assembly had become a council of councils, a network of minds bound not by territory but by purpose. Each speaker arrived differently, on deorbital fighters in orbital elevators through vacuum tubes from Luna and Mars. One came riding the back of a stolen wraith beast from Varnock Prime. The agenda was brief. The Archons had marked humanity. The choice was to kneel or to prepare. Dural stood again, this time flanked by commanders born not of Earth, but of its colonies, those shaped by low-gravity, high-radiation fluid environments. Human, still, but divergent. We broke their siege not with power but with will, he said. Now the siege is larger. His eyes burned with the memory of Vardun's stormfire, his voice cut like shrapnel. We will not kneel, not because we are strong, but because we remember what it was to be weak, and we hated it. Cheers didn't follow. Only silence. And then unified action. Within 6 cycles, humanity shifted every fleet, every station, every terraforming initiative. From expansion to defense. Planets were converted into combat engines, orbiting fortresses with atmospheric launch matrices. Stations became forges. Cities became hives of modular strategy cells. Civilian populations were trained in distributed resistance, with every citizen equipped with pulse-core signal devices to coordinate planetary defense in the event of mass orbital strike. But the real work happened in the Rift projects. Beneath Europa's ice. Inside Mercury's mantle. And in the new void space reactors seated in the remains of dead stars. The Archons had fire. Humanity would answer with invention. The first confrontation came not with fleets, but with a single shape. It appeared above Vardun without warning, a lattice of impossible geometry rotating across 5 axes, casting no shadow. Sensors failed, time skipped. 1,000 human instruments went blind, all except one, a human biointerface embedded in the brain of a child from the lunar strain. She heard it, and she answered. I am Terra's breath, she said aloud, and we will not be still. The lattice pulsed once, and vanished. The next day, the stars over Bastion 17 realigned. Not figuratively. Literally. Constellations bent into new forms, spelling a sequence of symbols never seen before. Human astronomers, poets, and mathematicians worked in tandem, decoding them not with logic, but with emotion. The message was clear. You are not supposed to exist. Humanity's answer was carved into the side of Earth's moon with asteroid-guided impact drills. We exist anyway. Far beyond, the Archons began to respond. They didn't send ships. They sent phenomena. Gravity waves shaped like blades sliced through Saturn's rings. Moons lost orbit and became eyes, watching. A rogue world appeared in Sol's Uit cloud, pulsing like a heartbeat. The message was clear. This was not a war. It was a judgment. And yet humanity did not flinch. Because deep in the dark, they had found something new. Not faith, not courage, but unity. Dural walked among the legions now training on Vardun's surface, rebuilt with alloy trees and living barracks. Each soldier bore not a number but a name of the fallen. They trained not to fight alone, but to fight as one organism, fluid, adaptive, relentless. Just as he had once fought in the corridors of Bastion 17. He stood before them, ragged half-machine, all resolve. They will come for us like gods, he said, let them. We will show them what it means to bleed. And so the galaxy waited. Because for the first time in history, humanity was not coming to the stars as vassals. They were coming as equals. And for those who stood against them, they were coming as judgment. The skies above Sindral split open without warning. It was not a fleet, not a weapon, not even light. It was absence. A hole in space like an unmade thought tore through the orbital layers of the mining world. It erased gravity, scrambled causality, and burned memories out of every sentient being within 500 kilometers. The air turned silent before the screams ever came, and when it closed, only ash and the echo of songs no one remembered remained. It was the first strike of the Archons. They did not announce war. They demonstrated consequence. The Terran Assembly named the event the Silence of Sindral, not as a record of loss but as a threshold, Before that day, humanity had believed the Archons could be understood, modeled, outwitted. After Syndral, they began preparing for madness. Project Foresight was enacted in secret. Nested in a dark region asteroid cloaked in refractive nullfields, it was not a weapon lab or tactical command center. It was something more dangerous. It was a prediction machine. At its heart, fused into a lattice of stolen Archon fragments and Martian quantum synapse cores, was a human mind, the last surviving member of the original Ghost Pike Battalion. Her name had once been Rena Isol, now she was just called Vision. She saw futures like others saw paths, not certain, not safe, but likely. And what she saw horrified her. In 98.7% of all projected timelines, humanity was extinguished within 5 years. Not by the Archons. By themselves. The coming war would not be fought with soldiers or ships, it would be fought inside the mind, inside trust, inside belief. The Archons would break humanity by corrupting their certainty, not their bodies. The Archons were not destroyers. They were editors. And they had already begun rewriting reality. On Europa's underside, where seas touched fire, human engineers activated the first stability core. It did not emit power. It emitted truth, a constant waveform encoding the human perception of space and time, anchoring local reality against tampering. It spread like fire through resistance networks inserted into hearts, lungs, ships, and minds. These were not weapons in the traditional sense, they were psychological armor. You could erase memory. You could not erase identity. And that was what humanity would fight with. Samaran Dural stood aboard the Sol Ascendant, a repurposed Dithari dreadnought reforged with human chaos logic. It was the first interdictor-class command vessel designed not for fleet command but ideological warfare. Its hull shimmered with shifting messages, some written, some symbolic, some encoded in neural resonance. Everywhere it traveled, it left belief behind like radiation. Dural spoke little now. The strain of survival, of mutation, of resurrection had aged him beyond his years. His muscles, though stronger, responded like wire. His spine had been replaced with a trihelix load-bearing exoframe. He walked in silence, but his presence was thunder. He had become what the galaxy now called him. The one who broke the siege. Then came the second test. A system called Velatrix burned overnight. No enemy was seen, but every human on its 3 planets was returned, alive on ghost ships that shimmered with unlight. Their minds were not their own. They spoke not in tongues but in dissonance. Each uttered the same phrase, always in the voice of someone the listener had lost. Let go's, you are wronged, you do not belong here. It wasn't psychological warfare. It was existential warfare. The message was simple. You are the error. The Terran countermeasure came not from generals or scientists, but from artists. A network of planetary broadcasters, musicians, emotion hackers, dreamwriters, those whose role had once been to express rather than kill, gathered under a single flag, Project Signal. Using the same frequency vectors used to deliver the dissonant Archon whispers, they broadcast emotion back through the system. Not words, not commands. But grief, joy, pain, wonder. The full spectrum of the human soul, unfiltered. It spread faster than any virus. And the Archons recoiled. Because they could rewrite logic. They could not overwrite emotion. The war entered its final phase when a rift the size of a sun opened over New Hydra, a human-constructed world in the Veilward Reach. The Archons didn't send troops. They sent possibilities. Thousands of timelines overlapped versions of Earth that had never existed. Timelines where humanity never left its cradle, where they became slaves, where they won too fast and stagnated, where they were the Archons. It was meant to fracture their purpose, to drown them in doubt. Instead, it made them furious. Because even in the worst of those timelines, they fought. The final preparation was complete. A fleet unlike any before was assembled. The Legion Unwritten. Built not around hierarchy but around fluid roles. Each ship was both weapon and sensor, both sanctuary and spear. Command was distributed. Every captain shared decision space with AI, civilian liaisons, and memory-encoded tactical ghosts from battles past. They did not fly under Earth's flag. They flew under a symbol forged from the crushed crest of Karash. A reminder of where the war had begun. Dural boarded the final ship alone. The Spear of Silence. It had no weapons, no engines. Only him, and inside a single phrase etched into its walls. Let them come. He entered the void alone. And the Archons noticed. A million thoughts screamed at once like a fractured choir. We showed you the end. We gave you peace. Why do you resist? Dural opened his eyes. His blood boiled. His mind burned. He saw Earth. He saw every name etched into the walls of Bastion 17. He saw Maya, her breath ragged after 10 hours in the reactor trench. He saw children on the Martian rim, laughing beneath dying stars. And he remembered what it meant to be human. We're not supposed to win, he whispered. But we do. And then he moved. The Spear of Silence vanished into the Archon construct. And a moment later, it broke, not exploded, not disrupted. It fractured belief itself within the Archon plane. The entire human fleet saw it from systems away, a pulse not of light but of defiance, measured not in energy but in conviction. And from every planet, moon, station, forge, and trench, humanity rose, not in fear, but in fury, because now the siege was not just against a bastion. It was against the galaxy itself. And humans, they were done being tested. There was no word for what came after the breaking of the Archon lattice. Not in Dithari, not in the human tongue, not in the symbolic math of the archivic mindclade. Even the Archons, whose language bent time and thought, had no symbol for loss. But something had changed. Across the border systems where Archon constructs once shimmered, silence fell, not the calculated void of strategic withdrawal, not the stillness before a trap. A true silence. The kind that follows the realization of error. On the surface of Epsilon Viral, where a billion memories were once entombed in obsidian monoliths, the stones cracked. Inside, nothing remained, not data, not prophecy, just dust, as if time itself had rescinded its contract. The Archons were pulling back, not out of defeat, but out of confusion. Because what Dural had done with the Spear of Silence had not destroyed them. It had shown them something new. Not hatred. Not war. Purpose. The kind no equation could predict, no algorithm could control. Humanity had not fought to win. They had fought to mean something. And that the Archons could not process. Back on Earth, the skies pulsed with auroras that weren't from solar storms. They were echoes, residual memory fluxes bleeding down from the broken Archon lattice. Scientists called them afterthoughts. Poets called them the dreams of gods who learned they were mortal. Dural did not return in a ship. He returned in pieces. Not body, not data, something deeper. A resonance embedded in calm channels, lingering in battle logic, present in decisions where none seemed right. His essence, scanned during Project Foresight and dispersed during his final act, had seeded itself into the memory cores of every command node in the Legion Unwritten. He was no longer a man. He was a strategic instinct. The first human to become doctrine itself. Maya Kor stood on the steps of the reconstructed Sol Ascendant, now moored above Earth as a monument, its engines quiet. She addressed no council, no crowd, only a single drifting relay drone from the Dithari remnant. Its message was short. We saw what you did. Her answer was shorter. Then don't forget it. The alliance that followed wasn't formal, no signatures, no ceremonies. Only shared intent. The galaxy, once ruled by slow cycles and calcified empires, was changing. The Dithari, proud and weary, had survived longer than most because they adapted within tradition. But humans, they adapted against it. And now they offered something no species had ever dared before. Common cause. The Archons did not return in force. They returned in question. In the fragments of language they left in the sky, new patterns formed, less imperatives, more inquiry. They were not gods anymore. They were students. And humanity, the once shunned species of broken flesh and raw fury, had taught them something sacred. The right to rise. Even when told not to. Especially then. Across the stars, the reconstruction began. Not just of cities and fleets, but of philosophies. The broken councils of the High Conclave gave way to new assemblies, fluid, modular, not fixed in power but in purpose. Cultures long silenced by doctrine found voice again. The enslaved Elari singers regained their resonance. The glassed world of Sarai was reseeded with Terran hybrid flora. Nomad fleets were granted autonomous space beyond the veil without surveillance. And in every archive, the story of the siege was etched. Not as legend, as truth. The Terran assembly disbanded not out of collapse but completion. It had done what it was built to do: defend, unify, evolve. What remained was not governance. It was guardianship. Humanity no longer needed to fight for a place in the galaxy. They were the galaxy now. Not at its center, but at its edge, holding the line for whatever came next. In the fields of Vardun, the grass shimmered with alloy veins under a pale violet sky. Children played where fire once fell. A new monument stood, not tall but broad, engraved with names not of the famous but of the forgotten, not just Terrans, Dithari, Elari, even defected Archon synthmines that had burned themselves out protecting colonists during the final divergence. At its center was a single handprint. Rough, human, untouched by time. Under it, a phrase in 6 languages. We were unfit until we decided we were. Somewhere out beyond map space, something older stirred. It felt the change, the ripple of an unexpected result. But this time it did not move to intervene. It simply watched, because the galaxy had shifted. And at the edge of that change stood a figure made of pain, fire, memory, and will. Samaran Dural, alive in the myths, alive in the code, alive in every human who looked at the impossible and said, "Let's go further." That was how the siege ended. Not with surrender, not with destruction, but with something more terrifying to the old powers of the stars. Evolution. Humanity had been underestimated for the last time. Now, they would be the measure of everything.